evening, everyone, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to all those who have joined us for the webinar today. My name is Seema Kaushik, and I'll be your host for today's session. It is our constant effort to produce well-rounded and confident future leaders, and we are always at the forefront to educate our students of what lies ahead of them. Keeping this in mind, GIIS has started an Alumni Connect webinar series. This webinar series connects students seeking career insights with alumni who are willing to share their experiences and expertise. Alumni offer valuable career support to current students. This enhances the students' experience and give them a competitive edge. Talented alumni have a wealth of experience and skills to share with our current students, and that can help them in their careers. So today we have with us one such alumni, Nishi Anand, who will be sharing her journey from GIIS to Harvard Business School. She will share with us about what universities expect, how you can build your profile and stand out from the other applicants, why United States is the good option for higher studies, etc. A little bit about her. Hailing originally from Jamshedpur, India, she is a GIS IB alumni. She was the IB World Topper in the batch of 2011. She did her bachelor's in industrial and systems engineering from Georgia Tech in 2015. And after graduating, she worked with Boston Consulting Group for almost 3 years. And recently in 2020, she completed her MBA from Harvard Business School and is currently working as a private equity operations executive at KKR Consultants in New York City. So before we start, there are some house rules. You can post your questions in the Q&A chat box, and we will take up at the end of the session during our Q&A. And over to you now, Nishi Anand. We are really, really proud of your achievements and welcome to this session today. Without further ado, let's start our conversations.
Thank you, Seema Mam. Good evening, everyone. As Seema Mam mentioned, I'm Nishi Anand. I currently live in New York, and I could not be happier to be here with you guys. I wish we could have done it in person, but with the COVID world has brought in a lot of challenges, but as well as opportunities. So I'm really glad and honored to have the time to talk to you guys. As Seema Mam mentioned, my plan is to just talk you through a little bit of a few things that I have learned having navigated this path from high school, college, job, MBA, etc. So mentoring is something that I just generally love, and so happy to be here to share my journey, and hopefully you'll find something valuable to take away for yourselves. I'll spend a few, like maybe 20 minutes, just 25 minutes talking through mine, and then we can open it up for any questions. So these are probably the only pictures, I apologize, but they're pictures that mean a lot to me. So on the left-hand side is actually the GIIS hostel. That's the scholars that two batches, 2011 and 12. So each of these people hold a very special place in my heart, and I'll talk more about my experience in Singapore. So that's probably the first. Then, as Ma'am mentioned, I went to Georgia Tech, and you see my graduation cap. I was an industrial engineer, and the negative one, the joke was industrial engineers are imaginary engineers. So that's why my cap, graduation cap. And the last one is a trip that I did with a few friends from business school. So I like to call a lot of my decisions through each of these transitions a result of this approach that I take called why not, and I'll explain what I mean and how I think that's something that has helped me over the years. So just a quick timeline just to keep things in perspective. So I was in Jamshedpur, came to GIIS 2009 to 2011, finished my IB, and then actually went back to Jamshedpur for a gap year, and I'll talk you more through why I did that. So I started my bachelor's only in 2012, graduated in 2015. Again, I finished in 3 years, so graduated early. Happy to talk about that as well. Then worked at BCG, and within BCG, actually, I did 2 years in the US and then a year in Europe, Budapest specifically, which was a phenomenal experience. and then went to business school in 2018. So let's start with where you guys are. And I think what my thoughts were when I was at GIS, and if there's a few things that I would share with you guys, what you should focus on is what you'll see is I want to talk through each of my stages. So school, college, gap year, job, etc. What are some of the two or three most important things that I took away from that part of my life and what I would then recommend to you guys? I think there's probably three things that I would recommend in school your focus should be. I write academic curiosity versus academics very intentionally. Um, I think for me, over the years that I've realized is it's very important to start to identify what do you like, what do you particularly care about, what energizes you, and that automatically will lead you to spend more time studying. Like I mean, this this shouldn't be surprise to you, but I think even in Amir Khan's movie Three Idiots, it's like don't chase grades or something, chase something that you truly love, and all the other things fall in place. So something that I would say is important is try to start figuring out what subjects do you actually like and you dislike. So I did the IB program, and I did math, physics, chemistry higher level, and business, Hindi, English standard level. What I realized was I genuinely loved business and math. I was good at physics, chemistry, but it wasn't something that truly energized me. And that then actually fed my undergrad decision, major decision, which was industrial engineering, which is essentially a combination of business and math. As opposed to, and I'll talk you through why this was important. I took a gap year. So I went through two rounds of college applications. The first time I just applied to computer science because that was the rage, or just engineering because everyone does that. So I was just talking about, so I think the reason I mentioned that is I think we don't spend enough of time introspecting what do we genuinely like versus what the conventional wisdom is that, oh, you should study computer science or you should study this is the flavor of the season. So I would advocate as you spend time in 11th and 12th, think about what subjects you like, what are you naturally curious about, and once you have done that, what else would you like as you think about the next step in your college experience? So there's one component which will be 100% your academics. The other would be what else is important to you. So something for me that was quite important was the flexibility of the academic curriculum. So I had just realized like I had never done business before and I loved it. That made me think about, okay, what are other subjects that I've never studied before or in the same way that I may enjoy a lot. And so the flexibility of the curriculum, I realized was an important criteria for me. And I'll talk about that is eventually drove a lot of my college decisions. Something else that was important was the diversity of candidates that I would be interacting with. So I didn't want to, again, get pigeonholed in an engineering school where all the conversations were about engineering, even though I did end up going to Georgia Tech, which is an engineering school. But I think just the environment around me, I was looking for a place where I could get diversity of thought, even in terms of travel experiences, etc. So all I'm saying is make your list of these are my academic choices, and then these are the other list of factors that are important to me, and then see which school meets those criteria. An example I would say is you could even think about, okay, I really want to be in media, right? If you pick a school in Los Angeles in the US versus if you pick a school, Princeton's a great school, right? It's an Ivy League. But if you went to UCLA, just because you're in LA, your career opportunities may be much better. So it's small things like that, which I realize is not what we think about typically when we're like, okay, we'll go Google what is the top 10 schools for this major and we'll go apply there. I think it's helpful to broaden that horizon of what do you want from school and then which schools meet each of those criteria. So that's the first thing that I would say, spend your time in at GIS thinking about. The other one I would say is extracurriculars. And when I say extracurriculars, I don't really mean go do everything, right? Be a part of the basketball team, be a part of the cultural team, be a part of the book club, community service, etc. That's not how I would think about extracurriculars. It's again, pick one or two things and really specialize or go deep in those. And that really helps in the college application. So one advice that I have for college applications specifically is don't just make it a list of all your achievements. So even when you're writing the essay, I think we tend to just want to just tell everything that we've done. Oh, I'm like president of this service club and I am school monitor for this squad, etc. It all sounds like then you're just, as humble as you might try to present it, it just sounds like a list of achievements. Instead, one approach that I've recommended to a lot of people and has worked for myself and them is think about what choices have you made naturally and see if there's a common theme across those. So for example, let's say you decided to go take part in a debating competition. And in that debating competition, there was a topic that was very important to you, etc. There's another completely different thing. Maybe you were presenting for IB, there's theory of knowledge, and you picked a certain topic. And now once you think about it, there's some connection about it, which tells me that you're really interested in, I'm making it up, but like environmental conservation. But it's a silly example, but what I'm saying is list down all your achievements, and important experiences that have happened to you in the last few years or choices that you made, and see if there's a recurring theme of what inherently motivates you. Use that to build the profile in your essays. Why I say that is a lot of admissions committee is trying to understand who are you as a person? Why are you different? Because on the resume, most kids will look very similar. Everyone has a 4.0 GPA or a really stellar GPA. Everyone has got student, head boy, head girl, and then has like a sporting activity, right? Then it starts to become, the candidates start to become very hard to distinguish from each other. So what they're looking for is what inherently drives you, motivates you. Can you add that personality element to it, which only comes if you've thought about your choices and why do you make those, and you can present yourself as a coherent person. That's the other reason why I'm talking about extracurriculars. What I 100% don't want you to take away is a good extracurricular does not mean 6 extracurriculars. Good extracurricular strictly from a college application perspective means going really deep in one or two things that really matter to you. So for example, if you were the captain of the school soccer team, but then you also started, I don't know, coaching like kids soccer league for underprivileged kids, etc. So both of those are same activities, but really show your commitment to something. So that's what I would talk about school. Is if I think about picking college, then the next automatic step from that is kind of what I was telling you. Think about what's important to me. So for example, for me, curriculum, the environment, and the career paths were very important. I was basically picking between either I could go to NUS or I could go to Cambridge University in the UK or Georgia Tech or US. And for me, as I said, I wanted an extremely flexible curriculum. So US is famous for allowing people to even change their majors and take any and all classes. So I think that was the biggest factor that drew me to the US. I think when I looked at Cambridge University, I'm going to apologize to Deepika Mam in advance. I think even for their industrial engineering course, they had a lot of physics courses, which I did not want to study. So that was a big no-no for me. When I say environment, I think another piece that when the decision came between Cambridge and Georgia Tech specifically was the college I was admitted to in Cambridge was an all-girls college. For me, I thought co-ed education was something that my parents had been very adamant about ever since childhood. Even in Jamshedpur, there were some really good all girls and all boys college, but I thought co-education was a big part of how I present myself to others, and I wasn't ready to make that sacrifice for what I thought were quite important years of experience. So again, that was another factor. Career paths, I talked about this. Georgia Tech is in Atlanta, and something that I didn't appreciate going in, but certainly have appreciated going out, is Atlanta has a lot of, just because there's a lot of really big companies headquartered there. So for example, Delta, Home Depot, etc. It is quite easy for Georgia Tech, relatively easier for Georgia Tech candidates from engineering to get jobs there. I'm sure the same applies for schools in the Bay Area. If you wanted to do computer science, if you wanted to do finance, schools in New York. The point I'm trying to make is think about what you want and then which school, which specific program meets that need. So for example, one thing that I actually had to trade off was Georgia Tech is really good for industrial engineering, but as I said, the liberal arts component in Georgia Tech is definitely not one of the best programs. And so that was, as I was thinking about my college choices, I did have, even though I wanted this flexible curriculum, I knew I was making a trade-off of a specialization in industrial engineering versus some of the more liberal arts programs that I might have enjoyed as well. So I ended up just doing a minor, but I think that was important. So this is something that no one else can do for you. Your parents, other alumni, Seema Mam, counselors can advise you, but you would have to come up with your list of requirements and then find a program which meets that. So that's about picking a college. The one thing that I do want to talk about is gap year. This is something that is a topic of contention between students, parents, drives a lot of anxiety. If I can be, I'm going to be completely honest here. So I graduated in 2011. I did apply to the US school. So I always knew that I wanted to go to the US. I didn't particularly know why. My brother was there, but he had told me a lot of good stories of road trips in the US. That was my convincing criteria. But jibs aside, so the first year I did apply to the US schools, and I'll be honest, this was probably not the best move. I only applied to a very few select schools, so Stanford, MIT. It was partly optimism, but maybe partly naive arrogance from high school about, oh, I've got the good grades, I've got leadership positions, I want to only in for Stanford, MIT. And I did not get the admissions from those two universities or even like the top ones. It was incredibly hard. I don't want to make little of that experience, but I think it also taught me a lot in terms of how do I work. So the first year when I didn't get the admission in the US universities, I had NUS, and it was a real decision that should I just go to NUS or do I really believe in myself that much that I'm going to apply again? And it taught me a lot of things that year. As you see on this slide, I think what my advice to you would be for the gap year is be very clear of why you're taking it and what do you want to do with it. For some of you, I hope it's for none of you, it's the case that you have to take it versus you want to take it, right? And if you're going to make that decision, what I would advise is make a plan or have a hypothesis of what do you want to do in that gap year. Whether it is, I want to pick up new skills, I want to do, I don't know, some coding classes, or I ended up doing a course, as I said, I'd always been interested in I got interested in business economics more after IB. So I ended up doing a course in managerial economics. I spent some of that time actually teaching. So as I said, mentoring and education is something that has always come to me naturally. I wanted to spend more time with it. So I ended up teaching kids back in my own school, actually. That was a fun experience. I did not travel, I don't think, but I do think that's a good time for you to travel, get to know yourself, but also be creative. If you're going to travel, there's a lot of these opportunities where it's called voluntourism. So you can either volunteer or they pair you up with social entrepreneurs in different countries. So you actually get a meaningful experience in terms of learning business, finance, or sales, anything. But there's a lot more that we can do now with our gap year versus what 10, 15 years ago. And I think it's a good, it may not be for everyone, but I am certainly an advocate of it, having gone through that experience, because it teaches you a lot of things, I think. One is it's not the most conventional decision that everyone would make. So if you have to make that decision, it needs a certain level of belief, self-confidence, conviction, knowing what your priorities are to even make that step. And then over the year, because it may at times feel a bit lonely because your friends aren't in that. You realize your friends have moved ahead, they're having all these new experiences. You may feel like, what am I doing? Did I make the right call? Maybe this was a bad idea. Maybe I should have just started university. So it helps you build more strength, mental, emotional strength, and resilience, which is always helpful going forward. Um, and then practically what that means is, so the first year when I was in 12th, I applied, didn't get in. Second year, I decided to do things differently. I would still apply. So the first thing that I did was, first year I'd applied for computer science, which I had never, like I hadn't studied, but I had just applied. So it made sense that my application was not going to be the strongest, as opposed to if I wrote my application on math and business, something that I really loved. So I did that switch. The second one was, instead of just going off the list of, okay, top 5 universities apply, I actually looked up programs that were more suited for industrial engineering. So Georgia Tech is not an Ivy, right? But it's been the best school for industrial engineering for 2-3 decades now. So that was the second thing that I did differently. The third was, I was a little bit more pragmatic. So I did apply to MIT, I applied to Georgia Tech, but I'd applied to Cambridge before, just because I knew for UK, it's a much more straightforward application based on scores and tests. So I'd applied to Cambridge as a fail-safe option. And because I got that admission beforehand, before US applications even opened up, then I could have be a little bit more risky. But what I would recommend to all you guys is always have your top schools and then your plan B, where you know based on the previous admission statistics that you have a greater shot at those. And then spread your, like, if go insofar as applying across countries. Sometimes like US, UK, of course the applications are challenging a little bit, like managing a lot, and Singapore, but why not? You never know how things are going to plan out. So always helps to have backups when needed. So that it's always you in the driver's seat versus you having to make choices out of circumstance versus your own volition. So that was my gap year. Coming to college, then I talked about college application. So after my gap year, I joined Georgia Tech. Oh, and then the final thing that I did in my gap year was, once I had made a decision that I was going to Georgia Tech, I spent a lot of time researching what the courses were, what could I actually test out of because of my scores, what could I study beforehand. Essentially, all I was thinking is, what is the research I can do about college that when I get there, I'm already ready to hit start and like run? Because I knew, I mean, quote unquote, I had given up a year and I was curious, like, was there a way for me to kind of make it up? And I'm sure if you guys end up taking a gap year, you will have that thought. I don't endorse the thought. You have to think about your career as like a 40-year journey. And so what is 1 year? But I'm sure I had it, a lot of you may have it, like, okay, how can I graduate back on time, etc. So for me, how I spent the last few months before college was taking a look at what are the courses, how would I structure, like what are the second year courses I could take in the first year so that I give myself more flexibility of going faster, etc. So You don't have to do it, but it helps to have done the research, and then you're less confused when you get to college, especially in the US, where you don't actually, someone doesn't come and give you a curriculum, you actually have to pick your courses. So I would recommend spend some time thinking about what are the first year courses, what do you like, what do you want to try in your first year. Be intentional about testing as many things as possible as early. The more you can say, okay, yes, I tried that, I know I didn't like it, I tried this, the better your choices will be when you get into a career. Um, and so the same thing is what I would recommend in college. Spend the first years um, trying as much. So even before you get to college, be creative. Like check if there are internship where even if it's unpaid, project options, volunteerism is something that I talked about. Like be creative in looking out for as many opportunities where you can learn skills, test skills, and don't be afraid to change your mind. I thought I might like CS. I ended up liking business, economics, some things that like in India, there's a bias against liberal arts education. And so when I discovered these subjects, completely okay, change your mind, because those are the things where you will be naturally drawn to spend that extra time and effort doing. Uh, and then in terms of one mindset shift that I would advocate between school and college, which was important, is it starts to become less about academics, but more what are the skills that you can learn? And that should be the question that drives most of your decisions. Not really, does this job or internship give me a better pay? I mean, you're too young at the time to start making your decisions based on financial compensation. Like at that time in college is a period where you should just be focused on getting as many skills wide and deep. And I think that alone uh, should be like the primary driver between when you pick your college courses or even the on-campus leadership opportunities. Clubs are a great way if you're interested in technology, like join the technology conference lead team to help organize it. Test yourselves in different environments so that you can push yourself to grow as quickly as possible. Um, so that's a little bit on college. And then I think as when you get to your college, you're now starting to think about, okay, what are the skills that I'm learning? Start to think about, again, as I said, look for patterns. What are your natural strengths? If in project team settings, in internships, in classes, um, where do you shine better? Is it analytics? Is it presenting? Is it structuring the problem? Try to think, like, look out for where are you getting energized? What kind of people do you find inspiring? And then try to um, see what about them, like what actions, habits do they have that you find inspiring that you can start to incorporate in your life. And I would say the two things that I figured were important as I think about like my earlier years in the career was how do I build confidence, and then how do I find really good mentors. Um, so those were the important ones. I think that was the presentation. I think that's more than enough that you guys will be thinking about. I will pause now and open it up for questions. But yeah, I hope some of these, like my life story, has been helpful. But overall, I would say the biggest thing that if I can advocate for is be curious. Like this is the time to understand the world has evolved so much in terms of opportunities that a lot of while parents' advice is still always going to be very valuable and relevant, the opportunities for tomorrow are hard to be predicted today. So just be curious, learn more, seek advice. This is something that I didn't do enough of back when I was in undergrad. People are more than willing to share their experiences, give you advice based on their perspective, but you have to be proactive and take the onus on yourself to go reach out. And along all of this, have fun. Like can't iterate this more. Um, if you're doing things that you enjoy, hopefully you're having fun. And hopefully then your decisions are driven by you, not by any fear or any conventions or rules that someone else has decided for you. But yeah, overall, I will pause there, but that's my journey, and I will now open it up for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nishi. I think you've given some wonderful inputs to our students. And I mean, definitely your journey is quite inspiring. And of course, the thing like you mentioned about the gap year and how in the first year, how you applied to all the top schools and you couldn't get it, but then you kind of did not accept the defeat and you kind of took the gap year and took it as a challenge and really worked for it. That was really, really inspiring. So Nishi, we will just take up a few questions what our students are looking at. So one of our students wants to know that did you take any did you redo any subjects? But I think you scored 45 in your IB. So so did you redo any of the SAT tests during your gap year?
No, so I think for the US specifically, your SAT scores are valid for 5 years, so you don't have to. I didn't apply. I didn't apply to UK my first round, but I believe if you apply to the UK, you kind of have to. Some college, at least Cambridge and Oxford, have their specific exams, and you may have to take that twice.
Okay, so so you took I mean only the Cambridge and those UK tests you had to take it again, but the US you
I just took it once because I didn't apply the first time around.
first year you
But
had
if
not applied.
someone's, yeah. So
Oh,
US, you take the exam once the scores are valid. I think UK, I don't know this for sure, but I think it's you have to do it every
yes,
application
you
round.
need to do it in the year of your applying. Okay, and there is a question like when did you like start thinking about universities? Was it during your IB in the first year, or like I mean when did you actually start planning your university applications, and what was the kind of support you got in the school? Yeah.
Yeah. So I started planning in towards the end. I mean, probably summer after 11th grade is when I started thinking about it. I always knew that I wanted to go to the US. I mentioned my brother was there. I didn't really know why. It was mostly for fun, and he seemed to be having fun. But I would say start early. Of course, earlier the better, but not if it stresses you out. So, but I think at the end of 11th grade would be a good time to start thinking, especially because US applications can happen a little sooner.
Okay, great. And what was your like? One of the student wants to know like what is your was your typical day during your exams? Like would you study a
Um,
lot or so they just want curious to know about your day during the
yeah,
exams.
I think it's been a while, but I what I remember is I spent awful lot of time at the dinner table eating because that was like I allowed myself. That's something that food and talking to friends while eating is something that's important. So I allowed myself really long breaks because those were my de-stressing times. But other than that, I mean, I was in the hostel, so I don't really remember. I was probably studying for most of it, but it helped to have some of the other students alongside. So it never felt, we almost enjoyed ourselves, had fun while studying. It didn't feel like I was the only one at home studying.
Yeah. And there's a good question that how important is your undergrad university when you are like when you are like aiming for something like do MBA in Harvard Business School like you did. So how important is the undergrad university when you are applying for your master's program?
Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah,
I
do
would
they
say, I
really
mean,
look at him?
yeah, I mean, more than the university specifically, I think your transcript, your grades are what is more important, and your experiences at that university versus, I think, as I'm at the risk of generalizing, don't want to stereotype, but I think it's a lot of us coming with the mindset of, oh, the brand name. So if it's an Ivy League, it's automatically going to unlock a lot more than the others. I don't think in the US, jobs or higher education, like if you end up doing postgraduate studies, it doesn't so much matter like what the overall university's fame and rank is. They care a lot more about the program that you were in. So University of Michigan has like a really strong chemical engineering program. I'm making it up. I don't really know the rankings, but I think their engineering program is really good and respected. But it's not one of the universities that will shine up in every list as like top one, top two, top four. So the pure prestige factor of like associated with a university name tends to be a little less important than we think.
Okay. And Nishi, what, just to recall, any teachers you remember from your school days?
Yes, absolutely. I remember almost everyone who taught me. Deepika Mam, certainly.
So do you know Deepika Mam is there?
Yes, I just heard her
she is
on the
a panelist.
so.
And Deepika Mam, would you like to share something about Nishi during the school? You remember? Hi, Deepika.
Hi, Seema, and hi, Nishi. It is so good to have you today with us. And it's always good for a teacher to have her students coming back. So to my students, you know, you did address GIIS students coming back after so many years. And I'm reminded of our times when I was your teacher taking physics, but I remember your determination. So no offenses, you did mention that you didn't want to do physics at uni. But having said that, I would like to share this with the audience that I knew you did not like physics, but you ensured that you get a 7 in physics HF. And on top of this, you are and you have been my first IB student with the World Topper Award, that is 45. I mention this very proudly, and I want all our students also of the current batch to get similar laurels. So all the best, Nishi. Good to see you flourishing. Keep doing your good work and all the best.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, thanks, Deepika. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts about her. You remember Shija ma'am is also there.
Yes, I was just going to say, I remember Shija ma'am as well. I don't think I was in any of the classes, but I love just the warmth that we would walk into the staff room and all the teachers. So I remember almost everyone from my time.
Shija ma'am is also there online.
Yeah, really sweet of you, Nishi. So nice to see you. You look just the same, I must say. And yes, your batch was amazing. 20 batch of 2011, both the CBSE and the IB batch that we've had. And I'm sure you're in touch with all of them. And so proud to hear about your achievements. And, you know, with the kind of simplicity that you presented to our students, there's so much of clarity. And coming from somebody like you, I'm very sure they'll be able to connect. And if you're leaving your contact details with us, you will be flooded with more stories, you know. Thank you once again, and God bless.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Shija ma'am. There are a few more questions, Nishi, so we'll just take them up. So, so one of the student is like saying that, you know, he's in 10th grade, but don't have much of extracurriculars currently. So do you think he can still, like, you know, he still has time to build on it? And do you think it's too late? Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to make a point about, I think extracurriculars, we tend to look at it again as, okay, what is my resume? What can I write on my resume, right? And one, it's never too late to start extracurriculars. I mean, I think right now with COVID, I was like, I have no hobbies and I started to learn the piano. So I don't think you're late in 10th grade to start picking up extracurriculars by any means. But the second point that I want to make is, it's not that you're looking for titles, right? It's not that, okay, am I a debating champion? Am I a soccer captain, etc. It's more like, even when you think about writing in your applications, something that I wrote was for my HBS Harvard application was, I have this whole thing of why not, which basically leads me to experiment a lot. And I talked about how I experiment in cooking as well, like that philosophy even applies to cooking. So why I bring that as an example is the universities are looking for extracurriculars not as a factor of like what more medals does this person have, but it's more who is he or she as a holistic person, right? Like it's not, they don't just want to admit a robot who has done mechanically in terms of they can do the studies. It's what makes you full. So it could be singing and you've never competed. Like that's not the point. Of course, if you're good at something, you may want to compete, etc. But it's more about like who are you holistically? And to that, I would say there's never a time of like, am I too late, right? So you can always think about what are the, even origami can become an interest when you're writing a college application. So I just want everyone to think about extracurriculars more holistically as a personal development versus, okay, what am I putting on my resume kind of a thing.
That's a very good point, Nishi, you've made. Like, rather than having a list of, 25 extracurriculars, students can focus on those 2, 3 things and can build on that and have a little more in depth into it rather than just doing one-off activities. So that's what my advice also would be there. So there is another question on, okay, so how do you think the role of GIIS played in your life, and how did it help you to kind of to open up the opportunities internationally, like going to Georgia Tech? And what do you think, like, how was your opportunity as a scholarship in GIS? How did it play an important role?
Yeah, I mean, it has been a tremendous shaping experience in a couple of ways. On a tactical level, I think the IB, I enjoyed the IB curriculum a lot. As I mentioned, curriculum flexibility, it introduced me to business, something that I might not have studied. Fundamentally, probably affected my career trajectory in a pretty meaningful way, I would say. I think I would have, if I had been in India or I had done CBSE, I might have just gone like computer science route versus having never studied business economics. I think that was one. I also think, I mean, the teachers were amazing. This is like, I had just moved from Jamshedpur, away from parents. The environment was very accepting and warm. And I think it helped set up for an easier transition to undergrad in the US. Versus what I saw some of my friends who had just moved from their homes to college, that can be a pretty big shift. So I think going via Singapore in a sense, like eased that. I would also say, again, this is back to the IB curriculum. For example, in physics chemistry, we did the lab reports, right? And then in TOK, we did the extended essay. I think those are much more aligned to how US colleges and the undergrad curriculum works. So even small things like the IB math focuses a lot more on like graphs and functional way of solving problems, which is again more aligned to the way US universities work. So I think that again helped get an edge on. When I got there, I knew how the US curriculum was going to work a little bit better than as I had done if I had just come from India. So I would say those are a few of
So
the
your
things. And then it always helps
really
to still be connected. I'm still in touch with the friends, teachers, so that has been a positive addition as well.
Yeah, great, Nishi. Great to hear all this. So there is one more question. So this is from our student who's got acceptance from UC Berkeley, and he'll be going to the US this year. So he wants to know, as an engineer at Georgia Tech, would you focus more on research or internships, or if both, what shall I work during my freshman and sophomore years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say, I mean, my answer would be do both, right? I think the more you want to experiment, the better early on. But I think you'll have to, it's hard for me to say like, oh, you should do research. So if you want to do a PhD, if you know that you want to do a PhD, then of course, makes sense to go the research route. But if that's not something that you're sure about, like I would say try both. It may be easier to get research roles than internships, as if I have to be completely honest. So that might be the only thing that I would suggest, is start with getting a research role. But also, if you establish a relationship with professors, you can often do research during the semester. So you can focus on research in the semester and then do an internship in the summer, or like do both, but at different times of the year.
So depending on what he wants to do as a further, like maybe if he wants to go in the research field, like PhD and study further, then the research would be a good choice. Otherwise, the internships, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There is also one question from, I think there are some students who have joined from India as well. And one of the question is like, if a student is doing ICSE board, so do you think, I mean, that's also is accepted in US or?
Yeah, so I did ICSE till 10th and I didn't do the ISC, but yes, again, they treat ISC and CBSE largely similarly. I don't think, yeah.
So you don't think there is any kind of distinction between the different curriculums? No. Okay, great. I think, Nishi, we have come to the end of the session now. And thank you so much for this wonderful and informative session. And I'm sure our students have gained valuable information which will help them in making their university choices. And we also would like to thank our audience who had joined this session. And I'm sure you have enjoyed it as much as we. GIIS will conduct many more such sessions as part of the webinar series on alumni. And we will keep you posted on the upcoming sessions. Do keep an eye on our Facebook and Instagram page. Thanks to both Deepika Mam and Shrija Mam for joining in the session and sharing about Nishi Anand. She is very, very happy to hear from both of you. So on behalf of GIIS, its students and my team, I once again thank our alumni Nishi Anand for for taking time to speak to us today. Have a nice day, and I think it's morning for you, Nishi. Have a good day and take care and stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was a pleasure.